I needed to be a good girl and a yes girl. And I used to take the crumbs, I suppose. And thinking about the work that I'd done with Laura, the turning point for me was just being able to go into your body and say to yourself, how am I feeling now? It was like something really jolted me into thinking, Elaine, you're worth it. It was like everything fell into place somehow. It's been a huge enrichment process just for the whole of my life.
Okay, so I am joined by the lovely Elaine, and Elaine and I started working together, I think it was almost 3 years ago. Is that right?
Was, yes.
And when I met you, Elaine, you had been divorced already a number of years, I think. How many years?
About 6.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you just bought a camper van to live in, a motorhome.
Yes, yes.
And you were going through quite a few shifts in your life, and you were really, I could feel you were really ready for the next chapter of your life. And maybe we could start at this point, and maybe you could share a little bit about how your life was back then and how you were feeling in yourself and your confidence. And boundaries was a big thing that we worked on as well, how you were with your boundaries at that time. And I don't have anything too structured today. I have a few notes, but I more just kind of want to give you the floor really to reflect on and to celebrate these little wins that we had throughout our time together.
Yeah, well, I was living in Surrey and I just decided to leave Surrey and go on an adventure. And I went on this really amazing queer retreat and met Laura. And she said that she was a relationship coach. And I was really keen to explore that because I felt I'd finished the biodynamic psychotherapy and just felt that I needed now to move on and not be scared of men and just get on with my life. I still felt that I needed some help with that. And as it happened, quite a lot of things came up which weren't really related. A lot of things were related to my childhood and childhood trauma, and which I think has led me to being very acceptant and very empathic and too empathic, and not having good enough boundaries, not recognizing what good boundaries were, feeling that I needed to be a good girl and a yes girl and not kick up against authority. And when I was being asked to do things which I sort of felt were a bit too much, or I was overstressed, and I still would say yes. And so, not that anything bad sexually ever happened to me. It wasn't about that. It was really about control. And that's taken me a long time to actually push forward with. And the work that I did with Laura really helped with that. And the way, all the things that she taught me made me realise just sort of where the foundations are for that, and how you build on those foundations, and how you recognise where you are in your process. And it's only been really quite recently that I've been feeling much more confident and solid in myself. So, and I think I've moved on a lot, and now I would say that in many ways I'm like just the typical sort of empath who's just had a load of stuff happen in childhood and then had to sort of format my thinking about how I deal with, well, friends and relationships and family, and build my confidence and just a solid foundation really to move forward with.
Yeah. And I remember that you'd already done quite a few years of work on yourself by the time we met. And like you mentioned, you've done this therapy and things like that. And as a lot of women that I work with, they've already done a lot of therapy. They've read a lot of books and things like that, and they know themselves so well. And are you able to explain a little bit about the differences between what you took from therapy compared to what we actually worked on in our sessions together, and what you took from those?
Yes, I mean, in the sessions that we did, you highlighted the different types of relationships that one can have, or the types of way men sort of represent themselves. And so I started to understand just how sort of how men were and how different men were to women as well. Because I don't know, I think I'd spent a lot of time with women and felt really comfortable with women and hadn't really understood how different men were and how different their thinking was, unless they've done a hell of a lot of work on themselves and they really understand the feminine, I suppose, and the way that men were, what they were looking for, what they needed, how they saw women, and how, as a woman, I could relate to men in a slightly different way and just get rid of that sort of the fear and understand the no is a sentence and I don't have to explain myself. And I think one of the biggest things that I did with Laura was really feeling into my body. And I mean, even though I was really set up because of doing the biodynamic psychotherapy, because that therapy, you just go and lay on a mattress on the floor and it is all body based, but somehow that hadn't really connected to a lot of my feelings and how to tap into them on any level, really, in certain situations where I was getting stressed. So I was fine in therapy because I felt safe, but in situations where I didn't feel particularly safe, just being able to go into your body and just say to yourself, how am I feeling now? And really link in with that, I think that was the turning point for me. And then from doing that, then I started to learn boundaries, and the feeling of doesn't feel good means I say no, or I ask another question, or I ask somebody to explain themselves. I mean, that's helped me a lot, not just with men, but also just in my general life, really. And knowing what I want to do, and also being able to say, no, I don't want to do that, or having the confidence to make another suggestion, or just say, I don't want to do that, I'm quite happy to do something else. So you're not actually telling them what you want, but you're just giving parameters for what you'd like.
Yes. Yeah, wonderfully explained. And this thing about being in the body and being able to know what you're feeling in any given moment, and to be able to say yes when it's a yes and no when it's a no. It sounds so incredibly simple when we talk about it, but it's so challenging when we've been brought up to be, like you referred to earlier, this like a nice girl, a good girl, which so many of us have been conditioned to be. And that's all about, well, what is the need of that other person? How can I fulfill it? And without causing offense or whatever, rather than, how am I feeling in this moment? And a lot of my work is around this topic of feminine energy, which we worked a lot on together. And the basis of that is being in the body. And that's a big shift that I saw you go through during our time together, is how much more connected to yourself and your needs and your boundaries you were. And then it's through not just through dating, but like you said, also just through the practice of everybody in your life, friends and family, then taking what you've learned from our time together and then going out and putting it into practice with these people, practicing saying no, for example, with just small things here and there. And I know you went through a lot of shifts also with your friends during this time, and you practiced a lot of that. And the Elaine that I see in front of me now, I don't see this nice girl persona. I see somebody that's very aware of that and probably still has to work on that, but has come a long, long way since the beginning of our time together. And credit to you, because you have worked so incredibly hard with that. And I gave you homework at the end of every session, and you always did your best with it, and you were so dedicated to the work. And that's why you've had such a huge transformation in that relatively short period.
No, I mean, I did work really hard at it because I knew how important it was. And the other thing I'd just like to say just because it's quite important, really, I think, is that when I was 6, my mother had a baby who had spina bifida, and everybody's lives changed. And that's when I had to be the good little girl. And that's when we didn't talk about things. We didn't talk about whether he was going to live or die. We didn't talk about all the important stuff as a family. We just didn't discuss it. And I'd ask questions, and my grandmother would say to me, "Don't ask things like that, Elaine, you're just going to upset your mother." And so I was never taught really to discuss anything. So, and I think that's, in talking to lots of men and women, that is quite a common thing, that in childhood trauma really forms the way that you are, obviously, as an adult. And some of it takes a hell of a lot of work to move through.
Absolutely, it's a big ship to turn around, but it can absolutely be done, and at any age. You're 69 now. I've already asked your permission to share your age, and you are absolute testament to that. And I want to come back to this, something you just shared there with your mum around this topic of clarity, because I'd like to ask you about this man who we shall call Charlie. But first, I want to just pick up on something else you said about this topic of physical intimacy. And I think what you shared was that you hadn't had any huge traumas, like big T traumas, like we call them, but still sometimes it's hard in that environment when you're intimate with a man to just know, okay, what do I actually want in this moment? And it's so easy to get caught in the flow of things. And if you feel comfortable, would you mind sharing a little bit about, just briefly, how you would feel now in that kind of environment, and how you would be different now with your body compared to perhaps in the past?
Yeah, well, I think that I was very submissive, and I wouldn't really think what I want. I was only geared to accept what was being given to me or what was being offered to me. And so now I'm not like that, really. I'm very aware of how I'm feeling and what is okay and what's not okay. And with Charlie that we're talking about, we had a sort of like a distant relationship for quite a long time, where we would just go out and we wouldn't have any intimacy at all for a very long time. He'd come and go, and I sort of accepted that. And yeah, then eventually we got it together and had a brief, more intimate relationship, but it still wasn't what I would call a comfortable sexual relationship at all. And I realised that I really need to sort out what I want and how I'd like that given to me. And it was very difficult, because I didn't feel that I knew how to ask either. And I think on reflection, my boundaries were just non-existent, really. And I just went with whatever was offered to me. And I wasn't actually asked for any feedback or asked, "Are you okay?" or anything like that. He was there, and I used to take the crumbs, I suppose, and that's now obviously all ended. But yeah, it was a really difficult time. It was very emotional, and it was almost like limerence. But yeah, I mean, but it came for me, and it helped me so much on my path. And that's what I think also happens. I think we've thrown these situations, and they're there to teach us so much, and they keep throwing something else at you until you learn that lesson. And it just happened to be that particular person just kept coming back to me, not anybody new. And so, I mean, looking back, it's fascinating, really, just how everything just panned out for me, and that I just needed those lessons.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I've come away scarred or anything like that from it. I've come away feeling, oh, Elaine, what were you doing? And you could have just got yourself a bit more together, but I couldn't, because I needed sort of Laura's help and support, and to understand what was going on with him as well as what was going on with me, because he had tons more trauma than I did.
And that's what happens, right? When we have these lessons to learn, they keep coming back around, and sometimes they come back around with different men, or sometimes the same man comes back around because there's still something to get from there. And I remember when we met, you were already seeing Charlie, and it was quite a confusing situation, and he wasn't fully available, and he wasn't able to really give you much clarity. And at the time, I remember you weren't really able to ask for clarity. And I think because maybe you had some fear underneath of pushing him too hard and losing him. And I wonder if you could just briefly speak to when he came back around then, I think it was maybe a year or something later, or less. And what was the difference in you at that time, and how did you deal with things differently with him?
I remember I was more confident, and he came back and said, oh, I'm really sorry, blah, 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 and I shouldn't have put up with it, and I'm really happy to see you again. And I saw him, and then he disappeared again for a few weeks, and then he'd come back again. And I allowed that to happen. But I didn't feel so conditioned, and saw it as a bit of a process in a way. I think I was almost sort of viewing it from the outside in, and really thinking about all the work that I'd done with Laura, and just looking at that. And I think in a way I was just, it was like I was almost like an observer. And then I'd heard that through a friend, that he'd been seeing somebody else. And I thought, oh, well, that's it. But it was like, I just needed this sort of watershed moment to think, right, that's it, it's over, my lesson's done. It was really peculiar, because I really went downhill. Then I had this huge panic attack when I was out walking with somebody. And then after that, it was like everything fell into place somehow. It was like something really jolted me into thinking, Elaine, you're worth it. You just think about what you want and ask for it. And it isn't okay to come and go. I want to know about how you feel. I want to know why you're not going to be there. And I want to know what's going on. And if I don't know, and if you don't, and if this other guy doesn't actually respond, then it's no. Yeah. It really, really is about being solid in yourself, and not accepting any crumbs, not accepting a little bit of this or a little bit of that. It's about thinking, I'm a good human being, and I'm worth it. And I think that sort of grounding and that foundation, which was always the aim for you to bring that place for you to bring me to, I think I'm more or less there now. And I've been on a dating site, and I haven't seen many men, but I mean I've seen about 3 or 4 men for 1 or 2 dates. I'm very fussy now about who I'll even have a WhatsApp conversation from that. So, and I don't know, I'm very perceptive, I think, as well. And that's been really helpful. So I'm not really time wasting.
Yeah. And I think with Charlie, what you were ready for by the time he'd come back around after having us working together for some time, is that it's not that he came back around and then everything was perfect and happily ever after, but you were ready to use that experience to learn more about yourself, to practice the skills that we've learned. And by the end, when that broke off again, he'd taken you one step further across your bridge to becoming closer to finding the right relationship. And that's what this work is all about, isn't it? Using dating and all these experiences with men, but also with friends and family, to grow within ourselves, and to not see these things as a failure, because it didn't work out again, but to look at all the treasure that came out of that, and all the things that you were able to go through, and so much quicker this time around. And you were able to ask for clarity, and you were able to really know your worth, and and feel grateful that he came back around in the end, and to now be able to go on these dates and confidently, like, I think much more confidently than before, and to know a little bit more now what you want and what you're not willing to put up with.
Yes. I have a friend of mine who, she's still married, but I quite often send her a little emoji of an umbrella and TNS, take no shit. So it's like, just remember, feel into your body, and just, is that acceptable or not? It's
as easy as that, but it takes so much practice. And what a difference from being the nice girl, the people pleaser, to take no shit. That doesn't night. That happens with a lot of work that you've put into that, and you should feel very proud. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, it's taken quite a lot, and it's been a huge enrichment process just for the whole of my life. And also, as you said, for my female friends, who I sort of felt have taken a bit of advantage of me, and I've done a lot for them. And then I realised that I thought I was enjoying it. Then I sort of realised that it was too much and it was too stressful, and I wasn't actually taking enough time for myself. So it isn't just about male relationships with men. It's like the whole, and my two sons. I mean, we discussed that when they've been a bit narky with me, and how I deal with that, rather than just going into the little mummy that I say to them, you're talking to your mother. So it's like a bit of TNS there as well, because they get a bit big-headed and think they know what I need. And I think with me taking off, that made them realise that I just needed the space, and I knew what I was doing. But yeah, what a change from this woman who allowed everybody in her life to kind of dictate a lot of things, and didn't know how to speak up for herself, didn't even, I can imagine, all the time even know that there was even something going on in the body, because you were so disconnected to it, as we all are when we start this work. We're so disconnected from our bodies. And to now having these shifts in every area of your life, and spending time, I think that's also something that has shifted in a big way for you. I remember you saying, like, now how much you love spending time by yourself, and you don't feel the pressure to have to go and see friends or see someone just because they ask, when you've got all these different lovely hobbies with your painting and your belly dancing and things like that. And if you were to reconnect back with that Elaine from a few years ago, before our time together, and look at the Elaine that's sitting here now, how would she feel seeing you sat here? Yeah, she'd feel really proud, and realise that the work that she's done is so worth it, and that also that she is so worth it. Just looking back and how I was then, and I was like that for a reason, because I'd had the childhood of giving, and then that happened. And I remember in my marriage thinking, well, if I'm good enough and I do everything that's needed and I don't complain too much, things will get better. And they didn't. They just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where I stopped functioning. So I just used to spend a lot of time in my bedroom. I wasn't enjoying life, and yeah, it was just such a difficult time. But yeah.
Well, what a transformation you have been going through and continue to go through. And I have no doubt that whether or not you choose to to move towards a romantic relationship one day. I know that it is absolutely possible for you. I know that you will treat every date and experience as a way of ultimately coming closer to yourself, which is what you've been doing the last few years in an incredible way. And I know that either way, this journey is just going to unfold in magical ways. And thank you so much for our time that we have shared together. And thank you so much for sharing some of your stories and experiences, and for being so vulnerable and so brave. It really means a lot.
No, thank you for all the work that we did together.
You're so welcome. It's my absolute pleasure. Such an honor to have worked with you. Thank you for being one of my first clients as well, and for your trust and your faith in me. Thank you.